What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Sorry if I sound kind of bad. I've been sick recently, but human beings crave entertainment. We always have. Two forms of modern day entertainment include movies and television shows. And on today's episode of LIAMS Random Introspectives, I will discuss which format of consuming the aforementioned media is superior, traditionally or via streaming. Let's get started. Before we get started, though, just a quick disclaimer that this is a semi-serious podcast that looks way too far into random topics using factual and scientific information for the purpose of both comedy and education. As such, certain points may be over-exaggerated for comedic effect, and I highly recommend people do their own research. Before we dive in, this episode will feature my cousin Christopher. Anyways, let's discuss exactly what defines both of these terms. For today, I will be using traditional media as an umbrella term. This applies to terrestrial, which is over-the-air TV, cable TV, satellite TV. More simply, however, streaming will refer to any internet-powered service that provides users with media for a semi-reasonable subscription fee. For example, Netflix, Prime Video, and Hulu. Now, with all that out of the way, let's start by discussing the history of television, then I will discuss how its various mediums work.
All the way back in the year 1900, the term television was coined at the Paris World's Fair by a man named Konstantin Persky. Skyway. However, it would take until 1924 until the first prototype TV was completed, and until 1929 for the BBC to become the first commercial television broadcaster. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrestrial television, more commonly known as over-the-air, free, or antenna television.
To help me explain how this method works, let's say there's a ball game downtown and you want to watch the NBC broadcast of it from the suburbs. First, there's an NBC cameraman filming the game live at the stadium, and that live signal is carried out to the news van. Radio equipment in the news van then broadcasts the video as an analog, nowadays digital signal to the NBC broadcasting station. Once at the broadcasting station, any needed edits or delays are made, then massive antennas on large metal towers broadcast the signal all around for many miles. And finally, this signal is picked up by your home's antenna, and it is then brought to your TV via coaxial cable.
The first years of television were slow, and BBC completely ended their broadcast in 1939 due to World War II, and partially due to the intense bombing of civilian infrastructure, including radio stations in the UK. It would take them until 1946 to resume normal broadcasting. From here, however, TV technology would take big leaps in both Europe and the US. Up until this point, TV stations would only broadcast in monochrome, black and white. But in 1953, the first ever color broadcast aired in the United States. During the 1950s is also when we get our next form of television, cable. First commercialized by Service Electric Cable TV. This new technology worked considerably differently than terrestrial television.
Using the ball game example from earlier, the NBC cameraman films the game live, the truck transmits it to the broadcasting station, but instead of being further broadcast via radio waves, the video is instead carried through telephone lines all the way to your house, where we now see a new piece of technology, the receiver. A cable TV receiver, also known as a set-top box, is an electronic device that's main job is to descramble video signals and prevent piracy of paid TV programs. We will talk more about receivers when we get to satellite TV.
In 1967, the U.S. government made it a requirement that all TVs sold on the market must be capable of receiving and displaying a color signal. Then, in 1975, we got our first satellite TV provider, HBO.
When using satellite television, once that ball game from earlier has reached the station, the signal is then projected using a much larger massive antenna, this time into outer space, where it is picked up by a satellite. Each satellite TV provider has their own satellite, which then beams the signal down across Earth, covering vast areas. The signal is picked up by your satellite dish, which then transmits the video to your receiver via coaxial cable. Your receiver descrambles it, and you can watch the game.
Another important thing to know about TV up until this point is that TV stations actually would shut down broadcasting every night, usually around 2 a.m., and would usually reopen around 6 a.m. However, in 1980, Ted Turner established CNN, the first ever 24 station, and to this day, the only station that broadcasts news 24 hours a day. In 1992, the U.S. government passed the Cable Television Consumer Protection and Competition Act, which opened up the satellite TV industry to some competition. Following this law came the creation of satellite TV's two largest providers to this day, DirecTV in 1994 and the Dish Network in 1996. A year later, in 1997, a small company called Netflix launched a DVD video rental service that would mail DVDs to your house. We will mention them more later. Now we will reach the turn of the century, and this is when the first cable modem was introduced, which would eventually be used by providers like AT&T, Uverse, and Comcast Xfinity. In 2002, cable and satellite providers began using video on demand in an attempt to let viewers watch whatever programs they want whenever they want. This could be called the earliest precursor to online streaming. Once we reach the late 2000s, this is when we start to see the rise of streaming. In 2007, Netflix would turn a DVD rental into a digital streaming service.
Streaming works considerably different than other forms of traditional television, mainly because of how it utilizes the internet. Now, when watching a ball game, the NBC broadcasting station doesn't broadcast via radio waves at all. Instead, they stream live the feed to the internet, where you can watch from whatever streaming service shows the game.
In 2008, Hulu would launch as the second major streaming service. From this point forward, cord cutting will become more and more common as people choose to replace traditional television and relying completely on streaming services. Traditional television was not completely knocked out, however, and those mediums would continue to enjoy a few more years in supremacy.
In 2012, Dish Network would change the cable satellite TV scape forever by introducing the state-of-the-art Hopper all-home DVR system. Each home with a Hopper DVR system would be fitted with a large set-top box called a Hopper. You could also get the Hopper with Sling that allows you to stream content from your Hopper while on the go to your mobile devices and even your PS3. Other rooms in your house would be fitted with smaller set-top boxes called Joeys. Auto-hop was a feature that let you skip commercials for select programs, although it was later shot down by a lawsuit, and Dish Network's famous Primetime Anytime was introduced. But perhaps the Hopper's most hallmark feature was its DVR, which stands for Digital Video Recordings. Now, you could tape the programs you want while they are live and store them right on your Hopper with access from your Joeys. Most Hoppers came with around 2,000 hours of storage and could record up to 6 programs at once. Dish Network wasn't the only provider to create a whole home DVR, however. The most notable competitor would be DirecTV's Genie system, which worked very similar to the Hopper system, just swapping Hoppers and Joeys with Genie and Genie Minis.
This would arguably be the height of cable/satellite television, although this is also when streaming would really start to become a formidable force. In 2013, Netflix would release a series titled House of Cards, which would be the first ever streaming service exclusive. 2015 would see big developments on both sides as Amazon Prime Video would begin producing their own exclusive content, and DirecTV, which was now America's largest satellite provider at the time, would be purchased by AT&T. Now, this is where streaming starts to get to the point it is today. In 2019, the Walt Disney Company, who already owned an 80% stake in Hulu, and all of ESPN Plus announced they would pull their content from another third-party streaming services and launch their own Disney Plus. This move pushed many people to cut the cord, but this would only be the start. In March 2020, the world faced the biggest pandemic since polio. Movie theaters everywhere were forced to close. As a result, companies saw immense potential in streaming, and America's largest cable provider, Comcast, decided they should throw their hat into the streaming service ring, launching Peacock.
This motto would be put to the test with the home premiere of Trolls World Tour, which was a massive success.
At the end of 2020, Warner Media launched HBO Max, and Discovery Networks launched Discovery Plus. In 2021, CBS/Viacom launched Paramount Plus, and interestingly enough, AT&T attempted a cable streaming hybrid called AT&T TV, but it underperformed and is now called DirecTV Stream. During 2022, HBO Max and Discovery Plus merged to become Max. So what happened since then? How did cord cutting turn into subscription fatigue? Also, streaming was supposed to be the ultimate piracy killer, but in 2024, 1 in 3 adults pirated movies. So why is streaming fallen from grace? And should we revert to traditional TV methods that ruled America just a decade ago?
Well, to answer that, let's take a look around. Before the late 90s, the only way to own music was through physical means, aka vinyl, cassettes, or CDs. But in 1999, Napster was launched, a free website that allowed users to illegally download music from the internet. No longer did you have to go to the store to buy a whole CD just for one song you like, and you could just download that song individually. But somebody had a thought. Are these people pirating out of malice or out of necessity? Up until that point, there was no way to legally download music straight to your computer. That was until the launch of iTunes in 2001. iTunes provided people with a legal, convenient way to purchase music, and music piracy rates crumbled.
Later on, we saw the creation of music streaming services such as Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. But this is the key difference between music and movie streaming. Imagine if certain music artists were exclusive and could only be streamed on Spotify or Apple or Amazon. It would be madness.
But that is the current state of movie streaming. If you can't afford every single service Hollywood has to offer, you're always missing something. There are also examples of corporate greed that have manifested through streaming. More minor examples include companies making low-quality movies and shows just so they can get exclusives on their respective services. Corporate greed sometimes knows no bounds, however. Take the case of Jeffrey Piccolo.
According to BBC, Jeffrey Piccolo filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Disney and the owners of a restaurant after his wife died in 2023 from a severe allergic reaction following a meal at Disney World in Florida. Disney had argued that the case should instead go to arbitration because of a clause in the terms and conditions of its Disney Plus streaming service, which Mr. Piccolo had briefly signed up for in 2019.
The restaurant in question was independently owned, but was in Disney Springs, and Disney had listed it on their official website as a safe location for those with allergies. The obvious reason this is related to today's topic is because Disney claimed that someone whose widow died by Disney's negligence could not sue Disney because he signed up for a free trial for Disney Plus 5 years earlier, because the terms and conditions contained an arbitration agreement. I haven't even talked about the many pieces of media companies have pulled from streaming services and they were never seen again. But the point is that streaming gives too much power to the conglomerates, and that power is destructive.
Now, is cable our long-awaited media savior that will save us from the corporate greed and price madness of streaming? No, not by a long shot. Cable and satellite providers run fairly corrupt businesses of their own. Service prices are outrageous, and ultimately both mediums suffer from the same thing. Here's the verdict. Whether you are a cable subscriber or a cord cutter, you will always end up paying high prices for things you don't want. So until media and TV companies alike can make it so people only pay for the specific programming they want, and services work together to make exclusive a thing of the past, bringing the industry more in line with the music industry, then there will be no decent way to consume and preserve your favorite media, except maybe for physical media. But that can be another topic. That can be a topic for another day.
Thank you guys for watching, and thanks to Christopher for helping so much with this episode. I know it took longer to make than expected, but I'm still trying to figure out things with this series, and you can help. I want you to comment down below any ideas you have for topics I should cover, and also any suggestions you have on how I can make the format of these videos better. That's all for today. I'll see you guys on the next episode of Liam's Random Introspectives.